Yep. Just open the doors, get people come on in. We got a front row seat. So as you come in, if you go to the chat box and you enter what city you're in, it gives us a feel of who's in the room. And that way Jose and I can kind of adjust and maybe speak to specific things going on in your area. Plus we want you to interact with us the whole time. You know, back in the old days when we did workshops in person, it's nice to kind of in the chat box, see what you're thinking about, you know, the points that Jose and I are conveying to you. So as you come in, please put the city that you're in into the chat box. That way we get to know each other just a little bit more, right? I see, yep, Katie here from Santa Ana. Very nice. Haven't been to the West Coast all year.
Hey, Katie, I'm a California kid, so
Yeah.
I know exactly where you're at.
Yeah, very good. So this we got, yep, Maria, come on in. Mark, got a front row seat. We're gonna get started literally 1 minute afterward. Give you guys a chance to get in and, you know, get settled, and we'll kick things off here. You know, the East Coast, we're hitting noontime, lunchtime, and the you know, folks on the West Coast are just waking up, probably getting going. Hey, Grady, good to see you. Yep, Lisa, fantastic. Getting a good group. Timely topic, right? How do you use the numbers going into 2021 to gain clarity? I mean, it's nice to have a flight plan. So, hey, Jose, we're at 1 minute after. You ready?
I am.
So good. So, okay, let's kind of frame this a little bit. So this is a chief level discussion, right? We're going to demonstrate the what and the why of budgeting, and then we'll show you, you know, the 6 steps of, you know, for the how piece. And you know, naturally an option. This is what we're experts in. So if you know, if you want to figure out what it's like to work with a growth CFO to get your 2021 budget done in 3 weeks, that's something we should definitely talk about after the webinar. So let's kind of jump into it. I mean, you know, budgeting has a bad reputation. I mean, I can think about the years that I was coming up in different management roles, and you know, doing the annual budget was not something we look forward to, because most of the time budgeting is treated like an administrative expense, almost like we're the annual HR enrollments for different benefit packages, or it's just a big mountain of work that you got to get done, but doesn't add any real value or clarity about where we're going with our business. So often budgets are thought of like administratively, or there's a unpleasant experience where you do all the work with the budget, and there's more or less just put on that virtual shelf and never used for the whole year. So it's not a very good flight plan if you know you're flying somewhere else because you left the flight plan in the garage somewhere. And a lot of times, not only like CEOs, we're not taught how to use the numbers and budget well. Most of the time, our managers, you know, they kind of came up on the job training. They really have not been taught how to use the budget, how to do the what if scenarios to find, you know, better possibilities to implement their sales plans or their operational plans, right? And some may even feel threatened. I mean, think about it. I mean, oh my God, I'm going to put numbers down about, you know, 6 months into the future. I don't know what's going to happen 6 months in the future. So they feel threatened. If they miss targets, you know, will their job be in jeopardy, right? So there's a lot of reasons to avoid budgeting, right? Never quite get it done. And then, you know, some people want to be perfect. They want to know exactly what's going to happen down the road. So they might avoid, I don't know what's going to happen 9 months down the road. So I can't possibly budget that. So, I mean, the impact is invariably when we don't use, you know, develop that skill, being able to plan and execute across 12 months, invariably we're leaving money on the table. Invariably, it's much more difficult to pivot. You know, if there's something changes like 9/11 or COVID or something changes in your marketplace, where you got to figure out how to go from plan A to plan B pretty quickly. It's much harder to do if we can't put the financial resources to it. So budgeting is a skill, right? If we're not doing it, we're leaving money on the table. If we're not doing it, we're probably less profitable than we would be, because we don't have that scoreboard to measure ourselves against. And probably your business is less valuable than it would be if you're doing budgeting in the way that we're going to describe today. So Jose, do you want to introduce yourself briefly, and then we'll kind of kick things off and really get into high gear here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, hey, good morning to the folks on the West Coast. Good afternoon to the folks on the East Coast. My name's Jose Villarino. First of all, let me thank you for taking the time for spending some time with us this afternoon, at least my afternoon. And my background, as I mentioned earlier, Katie, I'm from California. I grew up in Southern California, then spent a lot of time up in Silicon Valley working with initially with Hewlett Packard Company, where I used to run budgeting for a $100 billion company, for budgeting and FP&A. But then I went off to a smaller company, a startup, several startups actually, similar type of functions, simple type of roles, trying to get them to grow, free up cash so we can fuel that growth. Then I went into private equity, where I spent a lot of time in the airline industry doing the exact same thing for a portfolio of companies, once again, smaller size. And most recently with Foresight in the last few years, I've been working with companies that are getting ready or wanting to make that next step, right? They're looking for growth. They're looking, how do they free up cash? How do they attract capital to fuel that growth and ultimately create more value for themselves? And that could take a lot of different things. Being an old-fashioned finance guy, I always think of value in terms of dollars and cents, but oftentimes it's also what that leader, what you as a CEO might define as success. It might be freeing up more cash for yourself, more cash for your family, depending on how you're structured. So those are types of things that get me excited, and things I like to talk to people about and ultimately execute on. So with that, I'll turn it back to Kirk, and we're going to spend some time with you, kind of talking through some of the things we know and some of the things we've seen.
Yeah, this is gonna be really good. I don't know why I was so excited about this webinar, but I really am. And a lot of you guys know me who are on the webinar, but for those who don't, my name is Kirk. I'm the CEO of Foresight CFO. In addition, I teach this topic to grad students at Georgetown University. Military background, Army. Both my sons are Army officers. So as far as having objectives and getting things done, but it's kind of our DNA at Foresight, and budgeting is one of the key habits that we bring to CEOs. So let's take the step here and figure out more about who's in the room. If you can answer, I'm going to pop up the poll questions, and if you can answer these two questions, and I actually see my poll question didn't get updated between last night. So it's not the one on the screen, that's on the poll box. What was your top line revenue in the prior year? Make that this year, 2020. What do you expect? And then from a bracket standpoint, how many employees do you have? And just so we get a size of the feel for the size of companies in the room. What Jose and I went through a dress rehearsal yesterday. We want to get into, what do you expect next year, right? And that kind of gives some insight about whether you have a budget. we had one of the options was, I don't know, right? So if you don't have a budget, that's definitely something we can do a follow-up call on, one-on-one, and talk more about that. So it'd be great. So we got 69% of the return. I'm gonna give it a few more seconds. I mean, this is a good year to vote. I mean, some places are still voting. So if you want to get your vote in, that'd be fantastic. And then I'm going to wrap it up, and I'll share the results, but I'll share the numeric results, but everything is anonymous. Okay. Let's go. Okay, so right there, like 80% of us in the room got companies doing 0 to 5 million. So we're at that early stage size. And it's funny, only as a professor at Georgetown University, I got to say only 4% of businesses ever make it past $1 million. So if you're doing that, you've achieved something, right? And then we got 22% of us are doing that 10 to 40 million. So pretty substantial company, right? Very good. We employ 80%, got 1 to 19 employees, and then we got the breakdown there, 20%, kind of 50 to 250. So good to know who's in the room. What we're going to share with you, it looks like share results. It's been a while since I've done a webinar. The methods are adaptable. It could be early stage companies all the way through mature companies who are ready for succession options. What we're going to talk about for budgeting applies to companies at each stage, because each 90-day sprint, you're taking companies to the next step and skill level. So it applies to all the companies. Okay, here. Got to dust off my webinar skills. I took a few weeks off here. So Jose, what is world-class budgeting?
All right. Thanks, Kirk. So when people think about budgeting, what I hear a lot initially is, oh, I'm setting goals. I'm going to set a goal and I'm going to create a budget to get to that goal. And I think that's a good answer, but I think the real answer, what budgeting does for you, it gives you clarity. It allows you to prioritize. It's not something you sit down right away and start hammering out this, this, and that. You have to really think about, where do you want to be a year from now? Where do you want to be 3 years from now, for example? But it gives you clarity. When you start to setting those objectives, you start setting that priorities, it starts to give you an idea of what you really want to do. Now, that could be, as an example, grow your top line 10%, increase your gross profit by $10 million, whatever that number might be. But it's about clarity, being very clear about where you want to be, and then pushing that down, right? It's not just where you want to be, because then you have to get your managers, your leadership team on the same page, so they understand where you want to be, and everyone starts to row in the same direction. Old sports cliche, but it works. That's the first thing I think about budgeting. What is it? It's really about creating clarity. It's about creating that objective and making sure that everybody understands it, because that way you can get to that place. And then once you create that long-term plan, I'll say long-term being 12 months, 24 months, whatever it might be. Let's assume 12 months is, how do you get there? It would be very, very daunting if you say, I'm going to increase my gross profit margin by 100 basis points, 1%. You're not going to get there tomorrow. But if you say, I'm going to get there in 6 months, or I'm going to get there in 12 months, then you work your way back line item by line item, understanding what is impacting that gross margin line. Suddenly it becomes something that's doable, something that's not so daunting. Again, it starts to give you clarity. I think it starts to give you peace of mind. So that's at a very high level. That's how I view budgeting. It's about creating that clarity and then that peace of mind of how you're going to get there. It's no longer being reactive, but being more proactive and having a plan on how to get there. So then you start thinking, okay, so I create the budget, I create this animal, I really use it, I just don't put it up on the shelf. I've seen this happen before. You spend a lot of time on the document, on this model, and then suddenly no one uses it, right? There's no follow through. The next thing is really follow through. How are you going to use this information? And what I do with all my clients, and I've been doing this, as I kind of mentioned, for years now, is you set up these monthly benchmarks, right? Your checkpoints on a monthly basis. How did we do? We just closed January as an example. How do we do against January targets? I'm a big bridge guy. I like to understand, where was the actual, where is the forecast, and where were we off? Because I don't really care if we're off by 5 or 10. Those are just numbers. I understand why. Why were we above by 5? Why were we below by 10? That's what's going to help you understand. That's where the real value is in the budget. Not just telling you that you either hit the number or you didn't hit the number. It's about why, because then you can apply that going forward. Every day in your business, you know this already, but it's more information you have and more information you can use to look forward. So that budget, again, it's not just a static thing. It's truly a dynamic tool you're going to be using to understand where you were, why you got there, that story behind the numbers, and I'll come back to that a lot. And then what does that mean for the next month? If you just reviewed January, what does that mean for February? What does that mean for March? And although you won't change your budget, or certainly I will never recommend you change your budget's your budget, but you can change your forecast, right? You can start to understand, what did I learn from what I did in January? Come February, you got 2 more months under your belt. Come March, you have a whole quarter under your belt, right? And you can start using that information, but the only way you get there is by every month diligently and in a disciplined way, looking at what your actuals were, where did you think you were going to be, and why it was different. Understanding that story behind the numbers, very, very important. And that's at the high level. So imagine taking that and bring it down one more layer to your employees or to your managers and your leadership team. Now they have accountability. Now they're bought into understanding why. If at the top line we grew 10%, and let's say your sales director, sales manager, whatever, his budget was only for 5%. So it was great that he beat it, as an example. We beat the top line, but let's understand why. Why were we better by 10%? Did we sell more of something? Did a big order come in? You start to understand the dynamics better. You start getting that story behind the numbers. And it goes back to what I started with. It gives you clarity. And as you roll through the year, as you get more and more, you get more clarity, it starts to kind of help you relax a little bit. It helps you to be more proactive. If you understand that suddenly you budgeted for 10% growth, but now you're at 12%, and you understand why, because a certain product is selling better than anticipated. Understand how you can use that data to sell more of it going forward, right? So once again, it starts to give you clarity. It starts to give you confidence. And it's something I keep coming back to. This is a tool that is not an administrative event. It's not just something you're going to do because companies do it. You're going to use it as a tool and as a way to learn more. Because the more you learn, the more you're gonna be able to apply to go forward, and then that's gonna help you make better decisions. And that's what this always comes down to. And as what I do, I really consider myself not only executing on a customer's priorities, but also being decision support. Let's get the data together. Let's talk through this. Let's understand that story behind the numbers. I'm going to keep coming back to that because it's very, very important. And as you think of yourself as a leader, if you've got more clarity, you've got more confidence as to what's going on in your business, it starts to take the pressure off. And then what I found in 2020 throughout the COVID, even though our customers were being impacted by COVID, the fact that we had a budget and a plan in place helped us make better decisions because we were able to understand what is happening. Sales are down, why, and what markets, compared to where we thought we were going to be. It didn't always solve the problem for us, but it gave us more information to work that problem. So again, use this as a tool. It's an information process. And what you need from your, let's say, financial partners is information, right? And decision support and the data to make so you can kind of step away from making decisions based on just a gut check or what I just saw yesterday to what you expect to happen in the future. And what have we learned? What's been working, what hasn't been working in the business over the last month, the last 2 months, the last 3 months, and so forth.
Hey,
all right.
Hey, Jose, let's drill down a little bit. Let's do an example because I find it useful because let's give an example like a sales manager, right? Where you have a certain level of targets, each week, each month of what we're looking for as far as result goes. So operation managers, sales managers, they have a plan, right? They expect to do, it could be staffing, it could be lead generation initiatives. And so what the budget is it's nothing more than, translating that plan or that sales forecast into dollars and cents, right? Where you can see what goes in dollar and cents wise month by month to figure out also what comes back, what comes out of that machine that you're building. So budgeting is a communication tool, and it gets real clear when you translate operational plans into month-to-month budgets. You know exactly what's going on, both inputs and then profitability outputs back to the business.
Let me give you a real world example that happened during 2020.
Yeah.
We had created a budget for a client, set it all up. Things ran great. January, February, right? COVID hits. And what we discovered was, obviously, is we weren't spending as much money on travel anymore. So we had budgeted a certain amount. In fact, we had budgeted about $3 million in travel for the year. What we're able to do was actually reallocate that $3 million travel budget to digital marketing, right? And instead of going to conferences and giving presentations, this client of mine instead completely was able to, within 2 to 3 weeks, rejig that whole process from traveling someplace to give a presentation to doing webinars and keeping in touch with customers and because that was their biggest way of generating revenue, was actually getting in front of people and presenting. And she was able to turn that around. We were quickly, because we knew we had said, hey, we budgeted $3 million for travel. We're not going to use it. So we took some of that money out and reallocated it out to in this case, it was, like I said, in particular, digital marketing and webinars. And it was very, very successful. But the only way we were able to do that, and we were able to do it quickly, is because we created a budget. And I think that she had the clarity and she had the confidence to say, yep, you're right, we can do this. And we were able to flip things around very, very quickly and be very reactive. And, and I'm proud to say that, she was able to actually grow the business a little bit this year, more than we anticipated, especially after COVID.
Yeah, so things are much more intentional in that example, where you can move from bucket A to bucket B, what result you get. Very, very nice. And I want to highlight a couple other points you're bringing out. I mean, teaching managers, since most of us were never taught. I remember, I came up through the financial ranks and no one ever taught me how to read a financial. And the first time I looked at it, I was like, what is this? And so it's really a chance with the right expert, where, side by side, no matter where the managers are, taking them the next step in that skill set where they're taking ownership of the numbers, plan, that execution follow through, and with the monthly variance report in the P&Ls, be able to make those adjustments. Am I over, doing better than expected, where maybe we have some opportunities that we should see and take advantage of, or am I flying under what it was expected? Then no judgment, but why am I doing less than expected? So critical thinking, and then what action will I take? So it's really developing that ownership, that confidence where managers drive the impacts based on what the leadership teams, what objectives the leadership team sets. And you can almost feel like the weight is coming off the shoulders of the CEO because other people got it, which allows us to go do things that are even more valuable to the business. So any examples of that where you've seen managers really have breakthroughs in their own professional expertise?
Yeah, absolutely. That's where you really start seeing accountability. People, if you've got the right leadership, and this is a good way to understand if you've got the right leadership in place, quite honestly, right? Is when you push down accountability to them, are they responding to it, right? Are they responding to the responsibility? Are they responding? Are they understanding what their business is? At a certain point, I'll use as an example another client where we quickly discovered that the sales director really didn't understand the business very well. It was a way to uncover that, because whenever we'd say, hey, we grew business by 10% year over year, why? There wasn't any clear answer. We're fortunate that the business was growing, it wasn't shrinking, right? This is the right situation to be in. But imagine the flip side of that. If your sales are going down, you still had a manager who wasn't able to tell you what was going on with customers, let alone your large customers. But throughout, what I've noticed is as you create this budget and you get people vested in it, obviously we can talk about compensation and how budget will impact their compensation and so forth. That's another layer to add onto it. But it's about people understanding where you want them to go.
Where are we going?
It's no longer just a story. It's no longer just an email. This is what I want to do this year. It's really about how are we going to get there and how are you going to help me get there? And when you're checking on it month by month, and I'll admit, when you put in a brand new budget, this happens all the time. The first time you review it, it's pretty lumpy. The second month, it's a little less lumpy. By the third month, fourth month, you get into a cadence, into a language, and you start to understand what's important. And as a CEO, as a leader, you're not going to care necessarily about every line item. That's the other thing we'll get to as we kind of talk through it. You're not going to care about every line item. You're going to care about 3-4 things that are important for you to steer the bus. Those are things where you're going to focus on. That's the things we're going to focus on. But it also helps your managers understand what's important and drive to it. And then again, be able to tell you, or be able to just, clearly be able to talk through that story behind the numbers. I was successful because of this, or I missed it because of this, which brings up a good conversation as well. Well, what do we need to make that up? Do we need more investment? What did we miss? Again, it's about opening up communications, creating clarity. And when you have clarity, you have confidence. And I know as a leader, someone who started a couple of businesses and has worked now with many startups, you start to build into that, and that just takes a lot of pressure off. Doesn't make it any easier, but man, I always prefer when I've got a bunch of data when I'm trying to figure something out than when I'm just kind of when I don't have the extra data.
Yeah, but Jose, you're describing the alignment, right? Where if you talk to salespeople, you get all kinds of stories, right? Oh my God, the next $1 million contract is coming in today.
Yeah,
we look at the number,
right?
but
it's in the mail.
Hey, but it didn't come, right? Yeah. And so you get everybody exactly in that place. So now, no matter the good, the bad, and the ugly, we're together. It's a true team. And if I'm falling behind, my other management team member, they can help me. What's going on in production? We're making the sales, but we're not getting delivery out, right? What's going on? It just creates, if it's done with the right culture, where it's not judgmental, and let's see things for what they are and get the right response to move things where we got to get them. It's so empowering, and you don't delay action, you don't avoid action, but you actually just literally lean into wherever the kinks are. You lean right into it. So hey, so before we advance here, so we kind of got this vision where the team members working, they're creating out this this flight plan and running scenarios. Is there a better way? Well, what if? Be amazed at just from that second level of thinking how much you can get out of it. The analogy that comes to me, like if we're a jet pilot and we want to go from DC to Santa Clara, the flight plan is what milestones we're going to hit along the way. Like maybe my first milestone is Richmond, Virginia. I'm going south a little bit. And so if I'm flying and I see Annapolis, Maryland, I know I'm off course. It's not the end of the world, but now I have a chance to course correct. You can wake up my navigator and get back on track. And even though I was Army, I like fast moving, high performance jets. So So that's what the budget is, right? Is that communication translating sales and operational plans into the dollars and cents across the timeline. And then in your monthly financials, every month you're using the monthly financial like a scoreboard, and you can look at the number story. Am I over or am I under?
And why? And why?
Yeah, and what action? And they're empowered. And if a manager's stuck somewhere, when you have a really strong culture, other managers help, right? Because it's that true team kind of thing. So that's why budgeting, that bad reputation of being a bureaucratic exercise without value, that's not what we're describing here, right? This is really valuable. And if you get to certain pivot points, COVID hits in March, do a reforecast, put the numbers to your pivot plans, right? And it just makes things a lot clearer, and your team members know what to execute against. Is that a good way to kind of add some color to it, Jose?
Yep, absolutely.
Should we advance to the
Yeah.
Beyond the monthly financials? Let me click us into beyond monthly financials. What do you got for us?
So as I mentioned before, just a few minutes ago, you can budget to any level of detail you like. It can be as complex as you want it to be or as simple as you want it to be. The important thing, and every company is different, every CEO, every leader is different. It comes down to what's important to you. What information do you need to steer the ship, right? So here we've got different views. On average, our budgets we usually tend to budget, at least let's say within my portfolio, is obviously a P&L. We can get into every account number or just pick the big line items. Could be the different lines of revenue, different lines of cost of goods sold associated with that revenue, and then gross profit. And then you can kind of bucket OpEx and labor and so forth, depending on how you want to look at it. And then look at it as a percent of revenue, any number of different ways. There's no necessarily correct way to budget, but the tools and the processes is what's important. And that's kind of where I want to get to. It depends on what you as a leader, as a CEO, need to steer the ship. And that's what we're going to focus on. But the tools to get there are exactly the same. And those best practices are sitting down, understanding what is your priority, what is the objective, how are we going to get there between then and now, and then what are the measurements we're going to use to measure success on a month-by-month basis, or on a weekly basis, or a bi-weekly basis, depending on, once again, how detailed you want to be and how often you want to be in the numbers. But it's going to depend. It's every company is different, every leader is different, and there's no exact answer, but to what is actually going to be budgeted and how that budget's going to look. What's key is the processes you use to get there, and then the discipline. That's another key thing here, is the discipline to stick to it. Every month, you're going to review the numbers. Every month, you're going to compare it to the budget. Every month, you're going to have a conversation about why, the answer, you beat the numbers. The answer isn't because you're a rocket scientist. The answer is you got to figure it out. The flip side of that, the reason you miss the numbers, you have to understand that. That's why I tell everybody, the number in and of itself means very little to me. What it's important to me is understand that story behind the numbers, how we got there. And then what does that tell us about the next month and the next month and the next month? And should we be thinking about reallocating dollars from one thing to another if we need support somewhere, if we need a little bit more investment? And it's all going to depend on what's important to you. For a lot of my customers, it's EBITDA and free cash flow. And we spend a lot of time working on the P&L and then working through working capital. We're going to talk through receivables, payables, inventory, depending on the business you're in, to kind of understand what's that free cash flow. And that'll help you understand how much, capital you might need as you go forward. So once again, there's no right answer as to what you're going to budget, but the right answer is having the right process in place and the discipline to go back and look at that budget and compare your actuals to that budget.
Yeah, it's almost getting fun, right? You're seeing what's seeable and making, based on what really matters, making decisions on it, almost getting fun. And bringing that monthly budget into a weekly KPI, which just the monthly budget is really good, right? You got 12 clear checkpoints throughout the year. But with a weekly KPI, you get 52 checkpoints, right? So you can course correct proactively. And we're talking about KPI from sales, delivery, your people in your business, whatever it is that really drives the outcomes. 52 checkpoints, and the managers that take ownership of it. It's not the CEO who has to go through everything and micromanage. I mean, the managers, when they're really empowered and really, instead of avoiding, they're taking ownership to drive outcomes. They work together whenever they need to. That starts to that starts to give you, and now you're in a real business, and you're really being able to fly and go to where you want to go. And there were a couple companies, Jose, where you're helping them put in that weekly KPIs. Am I mistaken there? Is that right?
No, quite, yeah, exactly right. I got a couple of customers who do the weekly, and then most of my portfolio does usually a bi-weekly. Every 2 weeks we step in, and then obviously every 4 weeks we look at the full month and so forth. But it was about sitting down with that CEO, with that leader, and understanding what they needed to know. What did they want to know to steer the ship? And I'll be honest, I'm always honest, unfortunately, for worse. But
Glad
my
about
point
that.
would be the original set of this particular customer, the original set of KPIs we came up with about 3 or 4 months into this process, he realized, like, this isn't that important to me, or I really care about is this, and we ended up tweaking it. So, one thing, kind of going back to when you first start this process, the first time's a little lumpy, second time you get better at it. It's a constant evolution. And that's something I go back to. It's about how do we evolve? How do we keep the next Evo, right? The next evolution, something from, my background and how you get there. And you're going to tweak it, and you're going to find out what's important and what's not important. And part of that is going back to, I said before, discipline, right? But also flexibility to understand what's important, what's not important, what adjustments do you need to make. But the only way you do that is by putting a process like a budget in place to help you understand what's going on with the business, and then helps you to give you focus on what you really care about and what's driving value. Ultimately, what's driving that value? Are you generating more cash flow, if that's important? Are you generating more, are you generating more income for yourself, depending on how the company is structured? That's a perfectly reasonable goal. You're making this much this year, this year you want to make more. So what does that mean in terms of your gross profit, right? How much more gross profit do you need to generate to increase your income for the year? And then that works. Then the next step is, okay, if I want to increase gross profit by this much, and I know my gross margin is X, how much revenue do I need to grow? And then it starts to focus you, okay, if I need to grow my revenue by this much, what do I need to do? Where do I need to make investments? What's important? So once again, it's about creating that clarity, better visibility into your business. So not only so what happened in the past, you can apply it going forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Very, very, very familiar. So excellent. So the benefits. What's that all about?
Well, the benefits, I know I've touched on them now over the last couple of slides. First and foremost, it's about clarity, right? Gives you visibility into the future. Once you set a goal, once you set an objective, and you set a plan to get there, you know what you want to do. You know what you want to do, and you have a plan for how you're going to get there. Again, I keep coming back to, you need the discipline to be, run the process, but you also need to be flexible. You need to learn from everything you do. But that's what a budgeting process helps you do. Once you start comparing that actuals to the forecast, and what was different, where's the variance? Where were you good? Where were you bad? Where you needed, it's all about more information, more clarity, more confidence. And ultimately what I find, it helps you breathe easier. You got a plan. You might not, you might be rolling into a storm, but you got a plan. You got an idea of where you want to go and what you might need to do, where you can tweak, where you can't tweak, where do you have flexibility, right? It starts to give ownership. When you start pushing this idea, this process down into your leadership team, it starts to create ownership from your leadership team, from your managers. They know where you want to go. You can hold them accountable for the piece that they're responsible for, right? These don't have to be, beat them over the head with a stick every month conversations. These are real conversations about, okay, why were we better in this particular line item than we were according to plan? Why were we worse? It's opening up that conversation. They start to understand what is important to you. You get more clarity into your business, right? And they end up themselves, after 2 or 3 months, knowing what's important, start to focus on that, right? So everyone starts to row in the same direction. It allows you to be proactive. That's the biggest difference I see with customers or with clients when they come on board. Usually one of their big pain points is I'm reactive. I suddenly realized that I'm not going to make payroll tomorrow. I suddenly realized that, a customer had an issue and the problem's tomorrow. Well, how about if you put a budget in place to understand what's going on? That budget's going to inform a cash flow, right? And you can start to understand where in the year might you have a cash crunch. Where in the year, would you rather know about that 2-3 weeks in advance, let alone 2-3 months, mind you, than 24 hours, right? It's all about putting the process in place, having the discipline to stick to it, taking everything you learn and looking forward and applying it going forward. It's, if you're out there looking for capital, that's exactly what investors look for, right? They're not going to invest necessarily, they're going to invest in you. They're going to understand if you've got a good handle on your business. You don't have a good handle on your business if you can only see 24 hours in advance. You have a great handle on your business if you can see 12 months in advance. And everyone understands 12 months is a long time, but you have a plan to get there. That's what stakeholders, potential capital providers look for. So once again, not only is the budgeting process going to help you understand your own business, it's also going to give you the confidence and the clarity to talk to an outside stakeholder and explain to them why it's good to invest in your company. Something to keep in mind. That's a side benefit from the whole budget processing. I just touched on it. That planning and follow through, that is huge. Again, proactive, gives you clarity. It's going to give you more confidence to make decisions. It's going to help you breathe better. I keep coming back to that because that's the biggest difference I see when we onboard a client and we start putting these processes in place. 3-4 months into it, there's just a better understanding of the business, and there's just more. I'm going to use the term relaxed, but there's what's going on,
Yeah,
and you're no longer being reactive.
Yeah, but better controls. I mean, government contractors require this, so this is required. They got to have confidence in your ability to plan and execute across, the year to win government contracts. Otherwise, the contract officer just sees you as a risk. So these type of controls are required. And then I want to highlight lenders. Even bank lenders want to see, do you have the ability, if we give you this loan, do you have the ability to make principal and interest payments, right? On the company, got to demonstrate that. And if the company doesn't have a history of, developing that skill and a history of making accurate budgets and executing within the range, then that first budget they make for a lender, the lender's typically going to see holes in it, and it's a lot of times the deals fall apart at that moment. So the lenders just don't have confidence. But benefit. I'm going to highlight some of the things you said. Things you said, Jose. I mean, taking extreme ownership, having the clarity of that flight plan into the next year, teaching managers to proactively act on opportunities and areas where they're behind. So you're maximizing profit and the value of the business, plus that positive cash flow. So CEOs can breathe easy. Things are in better shape, right? So let's take a step into, some of the how, the 6 steps.
Yeah. So this slide is, take this. We're going to send this out to you. You can look at it. But the idea is, once again, this is a process. It's not just something we do or you will do ad hoc. The first thing is, committing to it, right? Making it a priority. That's the key. That's step number 1. Step number 2 is really understand where you want to be. What level of understanding does your team have, right? Your leadership team. How do you get them on board on this journey you want them to be on? It's really thinking through that. Then you have to get ready. You have to set the objectives. That is something that can be either you do it on your own as a CEO, or you take your leadership team and go to a retreat, be it virtual, wherever, and talk through where you want to see, where you want to get there, how the different pieces fit together. And then it comes down to implementing, right? Once you get those objectives in place, you create that plan. How do you implement it, right? How do you execute on that plan? Does that all make sense? And then you got to have that discipline. Every month you're going to review it. Every month you're going to go back and understand where you were. Every month you're going to get that story behind the numbers. Why were we better? Why were we worse? Understand that. It's something that I always tell people, that the only thing you can be sure of when you create a budget, and I've been living in spreadsheets for 30 years, is the moment you put that budget in, it's going to be wrong. You're never going to hit it to the penny, right? But the important thing is, why you're above or why you were below. I've never been in a situation where I actually hit the number exactly, but I can guarantee you, and I'm proud of saying that 90% of the budgets and plans I've worked on, I always know, me and my customer, me and my client, me and my company, wherever I was, we knew the story behind the numbers. We dug down, we got into it. And that's part of the discipline, gives you the clarity. That's about implementing that planning, not going through this whole exercise and putting it up on a shelf, be it virtual or not. And think about that as well. Let's say you do create a budget, then you don't do anything with it. What kind of message does that send to your managers or your leadership team, right? It's not important. So once again, once you decide to do this, you commit to it, there's going to be benefits to it. I guarantee it. And then, step number 5, optimize. One of the things we do, we spend a lot of time with customers is benchmarking. The first thing we do with any new client is we create a benchmark. We subscribe to a massive database, and depending on your NAICS code and the business you're in, we look at benchmarks. We try to understand where, you look at this data set, this pool of data, other folks in your business, in your same business line. Where are they, why is their gross margin higher? Why is their operating profit lower? Or in some cases, why are you better? But it's benchmarking. So not only do you start understanding what's going on with your business, you can start understanding what's going on in your industry and so if the rest of the industry is growing 10%, you're only growing 2%. Why? Why? Story behind the numbers. But that's something you work yourself into. You're not going to hit those benchmarks right off the first day. But if you start creating a budget with the idea is, if the benchmark in my industry is 30% gross margin, and I'm at 26, that's a good benchmark. That's a good objective to have and understand how you're going to get there.
Yeah, it's an opportunity, right?
Yep.
Once you know it's doable, then let's do the work to do it.
Exactly right. And then again, when the benchmarks go all the way up and through the P&L, EBITDA, tons and tons of data. But again, it's going to come down to what's important, what you want to do, what's your goal, and then we layer all that into this budget, into this plan, month by month. You put in the discipline to review it on a monthly basis. You put in, it's going to give you clarity. Once again, at the end of the day, it allows you to be reactive, and that's probably the key. When you can be reactive, you're a lot more relaxed. You can breathe easier as opposed to being proactive. That's not to say that stuff isn't going to happen. That's just the part of being a business owner, an entrepreneur. But having data, having that information, having a plan is a lot better than not having one. And ultimately, the point number 6 here is, I just touched on it, but you really use it like a scorecard. You understand where, was I above, was I below? Why? The story behind the numbers. How does that tie on my roadmap to this particular goal? Maybe the benchmark gross margin of 30% and so forth.
Yeah, using numbers is a powerful kind of breakthrough. And there's always the next step and skill for doing it. So let's kind of land our plane here, bring it home. I mean, CEOs have options, right? In this case, we're talking about taking the next step in budgeting. Could be the first step in budgeting for some at whatever stage of business you are, but always taking the next step in skill and the finer points and expertise to be able to plan and execute across 12 months effectively. Because when we can do that, then we can start planning across multiple years. Now it's getting very interesting for across the journey from foundation to succession options. So CEOs have options, right? We can do nothing, just status quo, right? Keep doing things the way they are, knowing that we're leaving money on the table at the very least. You can do it yourself, right? Instead of having an expert work with you, get the toolkit out like the IKEA bookshelf and do it yourself, right? Inspire your managers to go out and maybe do something that they want to avoid. Or in this case, hire the experts, right? That's what we're all about. So to peel that back a bit, I mean, Foresight CFO, our third habit of profitability is, building out that budget, right? Engineering profitability with the numbers and teaching P&Ls to have that extreme ownership. And this capability grew out of literally decades of experience working side by side with CEOs in very diverse industries, everything from organic food distributors in Oregon, all the way to a Himalayan salt company in Pakistan. And our solution crystallized, kind of our backstory when I started teaching grad school at Georgetown University. I had to figure out, how do I help non-financial CEOs, non-financial managers really use the numbers well to drive performance? And that's what led to the methods that we're talking about. The total methods, all 5 habits are the impact financial management solution. And today we're talking about habit 3, using the budget to gain clarity. And since we developed this, it's been battle tested with literally hundreds of CEOs globally. All right, and the impact financial management, we have a proven framework that's adaptable to many different CEOs, different industries, different challenges, and different stages of their life cycle. And we learn to figure out, what is the CEO's true objective? What do they really want in their life? And how does that relate to what we can actually do in the business, so that we go from planning and executing across 12 months to be able to plan and execute across multiple years. So now it's getting interesting based on what you really want. And we do that 2-person teams, 90-day sprints. So it's very dynamic. We're not limited to what one person would be capable of doing. And the benefits come down to financial freedom, right? When you're budgeting and following through well, you have financial freedom because you have the financial resources to do what you want when you want. Increasingly, as we get into the performance zone, we get time back, right? We can do things with other people that we care about in our lives, or do more things, because the business is less dependent by planning and executing well. The business is less dependent on us or other constraints that tend to pull people like me into the weeds. And maybe, even when Jose was talking, I mean, I could almost feel the sense of joy or happiness where things are going well. So that's, as far as about us, that's where we're coming from. And our vision is to be the growth CFO solution globally. And we're already at the point, we got 32 team members on 3 different continents doing this kind of work, and basically developing people who deliver with the wow factor, right? So to wrap it up right on time here, you got to love that. If you want to know what it's like to have us work with you, literally in a 3-week project, we can do your 2021 budget. And no matter where you're at, where you've been doing budgeting, if you want to take it to the next step, or budgeting is new to your organization, you really got to ground yourself and managers. We're a good option to at least have that discussion. So Jose, before we wrap things up, is there anything you want to add for the audience here?
Nope. Once again, thanks for taking the time to listen to us here for a little while. And if you have any questions, you can put them in the chat box, and we're happy to keep talking a little bit more. As you can tell, this is something I really enjoy. I've been doing it for a long, long time. And this is one of the key things I know generates value. I'm an old-fashioned finance guy. It's all about cash generation, and putting a budget in place and objectives is how you get there.
Yep, and we're gonna send the slide deck, a link to the slide deck, out to the audience. So you'll have that one slide that shows the 6 steps. You can break that down, and if you want to do it side by side, just literally shoot me an email. We'll hop on a call and get to know each other a little bit more. Okay, so appreciate it. We're at time, so I'm gonna wrap it up here. But Jose, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll see you all soon. But if not before the new year, shortly thereafter. All right. Yep. We'll send that out to you. I'll say, hey, thank you.
All right. Bye, everybody.
All right. Bye-bye.